I'm assuming that you-
Okay, welcome you guys. You're all live.
Great. Thank you, Dan, the voice from the sky above. Right. So, just want to say to everybody that is joining us this evening, thank you ever so much. This is again another Conscious Isolation University of East London collaboration. Here we have some fantastic speakers that are going to speak us through what I wish I knew at art school. If each of you could please introduce yourselves, that would be incredibly helpful. Yeah,
Hi, I'm Daryl Brown. I'm an artist, mainly sculptor. What do you want to know?
Carolyn, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
No problem. So my name is Carolyn. Well, maybe it's interesting to know that I used to study in London back in 2013 at UEL. After that, I did my MA in Berlin, where I'm based right now with my studio. I work mainly in sculpture and installation. A lot of it is happening outdoors. And yeah, that's the state of right now.
And Matt, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, my name's Matt. I'm predominantly a sculptor, mixed media artist. I studied my BA at Norwich and then studied my MA at Wimbledon. And I'm currently teaching at a college in Watford called West Arts College.
Bella?
Hi, I'm Bella. I have just this year graduated from my BA at University of Gloucestershire.
And Steve, please.
So yeah, my name is Stephen G. I also studied at UEL in 2013 on the BA, and then I did an MA in painting at the Royal College of Art afterwards. I also teach at the same college as Matt, teaching fine art, and I co-run a collective aptly called It's Kind of Hard to Explain.
Fantastic.
Brilliant, thanks so much. Can you guys talk a little bit more about your creative practice now? Whoever wants to jump in first.
Yes, I make a lot of work based on crossing the boundaries between natural and artificial, kind of looking at urban palimpsests a lot at the moment, this idea of decay in the urban world, kind of reminiscing the natural world, like when you get billboard posters building up and this sort of detritus in the urban world that's reminiscent of natural processes such as erosion. I'm currently working a lot with collaborations with street artists to get a sort of objective hand within my work. And yeah, I'm sort of interested in the Anthropocene a lot. So I'm looking at the ways that this geological age of the artificial and the natural becoming one, quite tragically, yeah.
Sorry, it's weird if I can only see myself or like not see everybody. I don't want to be rude, but I'm just going to jump in and say that yeah, I'm mainly working with sculpture and installation. Like I said before, a lot of it is happening outdoors. You could say it's kind of a land art direction, or at least the landscape outdoors is always an integral part in my work, such as features like the wind or the movement of light or the movement of water. But then it's not exclusively happening outdoors, but also trying to translate some of those sensations back indoors without being just a documentation of outside, but in a way try to be original. So, and it's happening across all materials, from wood to metal to photography to video. So yeah, it's pretty open.
Sorry, do I find it
like beneficial to your kind of individual practice as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't really buy into the whole being a sole artist and you know, being secluded in your studio. I think everyone works collaboratively in some way, whether that's just a conversation, a tutorial, whether that's going further than that. So yeah, my own practice really benefits from it, and then they work hand in hand, and I don't see them as separate things. They're not separate entities, they work together.
We're going to move on to talking a little bit about experiences of studying at art school. you guys talk a little bit about how you found it, and maybe just say whether you're talking about your BA or if you've done an MA as well. anyone could jump in, but yeah.
Anyone can pipe up.
Yeah, so okay. Yeah, I did my BA at Norwich, and at the time it was 2007. It was known as Norwich School of Art. But then, yeah, I felt like I had a really good experience there. The rent was cheap. It was a very affordable place to live, and it was also quite far away from where I lived. So I really sort of was immersed with moving away from home at like the age of 19. Moved into a house share with some other artists, and it was kind of known as a party house. I had a bit of a reputation, and actually the SU president came up to me and he said, "You've got to have a house party," and then he had like DJs and stuff, and so that was a sort of really good experience. And I sort of felt like that was a really genuine sort of art school experience, and the tutors were really good. And yeah, I don't know, in terms of like art school experiences, I think that the sort of affordability of living coupled with the being able to afford materials and live as an artist and work kind of independently and sort of be a big fish in a small pond, because there was a lot of artist run spaces around Norwich, and there was also a lot of empty spaces in sort of like a shopping mall that was nearby. So I sort of felt like rather than having to sort of network, we were sort of the network, which was really a valuable experience. Yeah, so this whole sort of thing was a really good learning curve, and the workshops were really good. Especially like coming from school and a foundation where it'd be predominantly drawing and painting. So that was super exciting at that sort of age. And then I went on to do my MA at Wimbledon, which again was a really good experience, really strong cohort in 2012. So yeah, sort of that for me, I decided to go outside of London for that sort of reason, really, sort of experience artist run spaces. And even the nightclubs in Norwich were run by, well, they weren't, the nights were run by students, so there'd be like student DJs and stuff, and so that kind of experience I think was really exciting, sort of being able to take control of a community and be part of a community in that sense.
Yeah, I think like I'd agree with that. My BA experience was probably better than my MA. They both had really good positives, but BA wise, like I found UEL incredible, really. What I really enjoyed was being in that bubble, you know, so far out east, not really having, you know, too much noise around you. I could really just concentrate on my practice for 3 whole years. And I was fortunate enough to be with a really strong year. Everyone, like, there was a huge group of really engaged students. A real sort of like DIY culture as well, which I really like. Like, you know, people were doing projects, people were trying to put on shows together. Everyone was like trying to get the tutor's attention for more tutorials. It was just like a really, really good buzz. And maybe I was the tutors that I had, and this doesn't happen very often, or I don't see it happen very often, is I was able to get quite good career advice, or how to operate as an artist outside of an institution. And again, well, one of my tutors at UEL was Faisal at printmaking whilst I was there. So only because I was in painting, I didn't see him too much, but I bumped into him every now and then. But still to this day, he, if I've got a question, like when I published like a book a couple of years ago and I needed some guidance on copyright laws, and he was, you know, he would always come back to me on the same day, give me that information. So generally speaking, I feel quite privileged in the sort of experiences that I've had.
I'm going to jump right in because I did the BA together with Steve, and I'd agree that I only joined in the second year because I was kind of an exchange student first. But then I loved it so much that I actually stayed at UEL because, yeah, again, the year was so, like, everybody was so driven, and I feel like that kind of time to do it more and to do it larger, which was at the time exactly what I needed to hear. And then I went back to Berlin to do my MA there, and the experience was quite, I think for a lot of people, the MA feels it's a bit more difficult because you're more in your head. You kind of think you already know who you are, but really you don't. And I also had quite a famous professor, Ai Weiwei, who was this kind of celebrity artist who would be there like once a year or so. Like, time was limited to talk to him, so it was a lot like figuring it out for yourself. And also, he was the kind of teacher who would be like, who'd always say, would question everything like a lot. He wasn't very encouraging. In fact, he was the opposite. But also that, like, now looking back, I think I learned a lot from that in terms of like standing your ground and like still keep doing what you want to do, even though somebody else thinks it's not relevant, but like finding it relevant for yourself still. So I'd say like, yeah, two very different experiences, but I value both kind of equally. I mean, I have very fond memories of UEL and very different ones from the other one, but yeah, they're both equally good. Yeah.
I'd say that mine was probably different again. I guess I've just graduated, so it's still quite fresh, but Cheltenham's kind of like out in the sticks compared to London. I think because I did my foundation and then I had 2 or 3 years out and then I went, everyone else was quite a lot younger than me, so I kind of felt a little bit out of place, but I felt like I knew that that was the exact time that I wanted to be there, and I knew that that was like the time for me. So that was kind of really good for me. I just knew. I'd say that I really liked the fact that it was quite small year groups as well. So ours was probably the biggest, and it was 34. And then it kind of reduced, but that was like amazing for us because the tutor time was so good, and it meant that we had like massive studio spaces and like loads of space to roam, which was really cool. Also, I'd say like the tutors were great at kind of like outreach, and as someone else said, like teaching you how to properly operate as an artist in our final year was so beneficial to us. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't answered. I also went to UEL, got to mention that at the beginning. I had a similar experience as most of you, I think. I had a really good group of peers. We were all very enthusiastic and driven. We started setting up shows almost instantly, like independently, and that carried on. I think without that peer group, I think it would have been a very different experience. We got on really well. We had a great relationship. I started working for him after my first year. So then I was like traveling to Germany and setting up quite big shows. So yeah, UEL was really good for me. At least in terms of being able to kind of create like a working practice like in the studio. I think once you get outside the studio, that's when some issues start to arise. But in terms of being in the studio and being creative, it was a great environment.
Daryl, can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by saying it was too indulgent in allowing you to kind of develop your own? I'm intrigued. That's what you mean.
Well, for myself, I don't really have a problem with that. Like, I was happy to be that way, but I just think sometimes you could just be doing whatever. And if that's your vision, then it's great, go for it. And sometimes your vision isn't that great and you need a bit of critique. So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I should also put my hands up and say I used to run away whenever my tutor was coming in because I didn't want to get any influence off them. So I wasn't a student in the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. It leads us on quite nicely to thinking about the question of what you wish you'd done differently when you were studying, if anything.
Oh, sorry. I wish I hadn't run away when my tutors were coming in, and I wish I'd got more involved in discourse. You know, I think I went to maybe like 4 seminars a year. So stuff like that. I wish I'd kind of got involved a bit more.
I mean, actually, your position here is quite interesting because you were a student, now you're staff.
Yes.
So
with a break, though. With a break. I didn't stay on.
So with regards to that, I mean, do you sort of see a reflection in students of yourself during your time, and do you ever think you're going to regret not having the facilities that you got here? Because obviously, once you get out into the real world,
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
you've got to fund your own machine, as it were.
Yes, and that's one thing I should have mentioned. The facilities at UEL are really good, and it was something that I took full advantage of. You know, it was a pre-health and safety madness. So not that I do it, but the technician used to give me the keys to the workshop, and I could just come in on the weekend and make my work. So things like that is great. But to answer your question, Sam, I definitely see what I haven't learned in other students, and I tell them that they need to take advantage of the workshops and they need to make sure they engage, etc. But that's also where I got the comment of, you know, they're a bit too indulgent sometimes on people's individual creativity, because I see it happening. I see, yeah.
I mean, with the rest of you guys, how did your practice change? Because I'm assuming with regards to you okay? I'm assuming with regards to you know, being in a facility which has all of the different facilities that you may have at your fingertips, setting up your own studio. I mean, what was the first thing that really like inflicted your practice after that of art school?
Well, I was going to say the one thing I would have done differently is use the workshops more. I think I used them quite a lot, but I mean, I tell my students now to like try and appreciate because we've got really good facilities where we at the college in Watford. But I did use the workshops, but I just think looking back, I didn't embrace the skill sets as much of the technicians as much as I should have. And as a result, a lot of my work was quite conceptually good and idea driven, but a lot of it was craply made, really. A lot of it wasn't resolved because of that. And I guess now I'm embracing the workshops where I work now, and I use the workshops a lot, and as a result, the work's better executed. But yeah, I guess that's something I would have, if I could go back, I would use the facilities a lot better than I did, especially as they were included and accessible. Yeah, but yeah, so that's one.
I definitely agree with that. I feel like I did use all of the facilities a lot, but definitely felt like I should have used them more. It's more just like venturing out into different things as well, because I found I'd get stuck with one thing and I'd be really enjoying it, so I'd just go all guns blazing and then realise actually I should have tried like different variations of that or just completely different materials. So yeah, that's one thing.
Yeah, I think I wasted a lot of time just making stuff badly, and if I learned how to make stuff properly, it would have saved a lot of time. So I guess that's what I'd say to students now, like, yeah, learn how to make stuff.
Yeah, I think I almost did my education backwards, really. On my BA, I used no workshops. I thought I was a painter, paint. All I'm going to do is paint. Go on to a painting MA, and then I realised I'm not a good painter at all. So then, you know, experiment on my MA, use all the workshops on my MA, and then graduate. So yeah, it's quite a strange one. I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, who your peers, your tutors. You know, I think one of the questions later is about, you know, if you studied somewhere else, how much would your work change? And I think it goes beyond that as well. It's also about, yeah, the peers and the tutors that you're with. Like I think as soon as because I went straight from my BA to my MA, I was quite suggestible to change. And I think as soon as I had a new set of tutors, my whole thinking just like flipped.
And Carolyn, obviously, she talked earlier about I'm just thinking, it just reminded me, because quite a lot of times to artists, they say that one of the things they regret is not taking up an exchange or not having it if it's possible.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. It was all fully funded by the British Council, and so all my accommodation could be paid for, and that was really beneficial. I was about 20 at the time, and I don't know, in Germany they study a lot later, so a lot of the students were a lot older and more resolved, like 25, 27 older. But it was amazing. Like it culturally in Germany, there's a completely different idea to what art school is. The tutors, a lot of them had Marijke van Bommerdam and Marlene Dumas and Franz Ackermann. So like a lot of them had really, they were really sort of like, a lot of them were quite A-list artists, which was really interesting and exciting to be around. But there was a sort of it was just a completely different culture, and the studios were open 24 hours a day, and people literally would live in the studios and be completely immersed in their practice, and it was just so much more laid back. Like you could literally make whatever you wanted and be there all the time. You could work all night, and yeah, it was just such an amazing experience. And I came back with just this completely different sort of view of what art school is or could be. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was an Erasmus program. Hopefully, I don't know if that's still going to be happening after Brexit, but I don't know, hopefully.
Did you find that the teaching was very different? Because I found that when it was,
yeah. There was a sort of different relationship as well. Like a lot of the time they'd throw massive sort of exhibitions and parties like the tutors, but I think a lot of that was, I mean, they're sort of on a completely different salary as well, so they can afford to do that. But it's sort of it's completely different structurally as well, because they would for instance, my tutor was living in Amsterdam, which is obviously like completely like, well, not the other side of Europe, but Germany. So they'd visit for like a week, and it'd be super intense, like, because they'd literally be like living at the art school, and then they'd disappear for like a week or two, and then all of a sudden they'd be back. And it was incredibly harsh. The critiques, I couldn't believe it, because like coming from the critiques in the UK, like the critiques
tutorials, and through that dissertation I realized I was interested in that language, but not through making images, if that makes sort of sense.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, since then, into your own studio practice outside the four walls of an institution.
Yeah.
Again, has there been a dramatic change in your profile with regards to your visual language?
I think so. It's quite hard. Like, I think hindsight will definitely show me more. But yeah, I think since the last few months of my studies to now, I think there's been a steady progression. I think, like, if you look back at the work I've made over the last 5 years since graduating, it's still recognizable as my work, I think, which is quite hard at the beginning, because I work across disciplines. I don't necessarily have a visual style, but the style comes through the concepts, and I think that's taking, I've only just started to think that a body of work is starting to come around, and that took 5 years. So yeah, it's been quite a challenge, but I think I think over 5 years, things are starting to piece together, and that's sort of how I actually make my work or curate my work. So a lot of my work is quite small and little components. And when I was talking about frameworks before and working with the collective IKO, that's why I still think my painting education is important, because I still see curation as painting. Like, I see a whole wall as a image, with the paintings on top are just components of that framework. So I think I think last year I had to sort of, like, not an epiphany, but for quite a few years I sort of didn't like the work I was doing at on my BA, and then I sort of thought, you know, what was the point? It didn't make any sense or no links to what I'm doing now. But I think now I think it just comes with age. Like, you start to realise that everything has developed. Like, even if it takes a dramatic shift, that there are still little, you know, parts that have come from previous works.
Any other biggest challenges, or should I move on to the next question?
I can say one.
Okay.
I'd say that I didn't actually have like any humongous challenges. It's more basically coronavirus. So we were supposed to be having our degree show, and that got ripped out of our hands. So trying to collaborate through Zoom and doing it all virtually and trying to still make our catalogue without being able to see each other was really hard. But I do think it has given us skills to understand each other better, and we really came together towards the end because we kind of just had to. So it was helpful in a way.
And what about biggest achievements on a more positive note? No achievements.
I think, like, going to Norwich, sort of a small sort of art school outside of London, there was a lot of opportunities that came because of that. And yeah, so my first year there was the opportunity to exhibit abroad. So like 5 of us exhibited in Amsterdam, and that was really beneficial and really exciting. Yeah, and sort of living abroad was really, I felt really chuffed with doing that as well. It's at such an early stage in my career. Yeah, and then just curating shows and working with like empty spaces in Norwich was really good.
Yeah, I feel sort of a bit weird about talking about achievements, really, but I think, yeah, I mean, I had like a nice year when I got onto my MA. That was really nice. And in that same year, I was shortlisted for this prize at the time for painting and sculpture. It was its inaugural year. It was called the Woon Art Prize, which had a show in Newcastle later that year. That was really nice. I think I find the collective really rewarding. So I guess that would be an achievement. And we've been going for about 3 years now, and I think the show that we're doing at the moment, or planning at the moment, will be the 10th one as well. So that's it's nice to be able to maintain something which is there's no income from it, but we're managing to sustain it, whether that's through Arts Council funding or coming out of our own pocket, or, you know, hoping that the artists don't mind if for some projects they're not, you know, getting any money for it. But I think it, yeah, I'd count it as a, you know, success that it's still carrying on. Yeah.
I'd also say, like, I mean, it's a bit cheesy, but I mean, that's what I've written down, at least in my notebook here, that obviously, or I think the biggest achievement really for me was to just get confidence in my work and to trust what I do is good. And like, trust that there is some kind of importance in the world for what I do. And I feel like that is the biggest achievement you can get from art school, because that is the key skill as an artist that's going to keep you doing your thing, you know, regardless of what happens along the way. So I'm not going to mention any CV kind of stuff, because I know you all have amazing CVs. So yeah, just doing the work, I think, and still doing it up until today. That's the biggest achievement.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Can we talk a bit about any advice you would give to current students now?
It's a bit of a difficult one, so I was thinking about it not really with COVID in mind. But yeah, I think being fully as engaged as you possibly can. There's parts of the education system that don't train you for being a professional, being outside. You know, there's a lot of the art education system still in that sort of romanticized stage where it's all about you being in your studio making art, which is totally fine. But that does leave you a bit, you know, when you graduate, if you don't have a studio, it leaves you a bit sort of cold and not really knowing where to go. So I think as advice for students, engage with your tutors as much as possible. You know, ask about what studio complexes there are, what galleries there are, what artist-run galleries there are. Instagram is a really good place to find, you know, like artist-run spaces, non-commercial galleries as well. Also, you know, especially at the moment, a lot of artists have been needing to apply for funding through Arts Council grants and things like that as well. So, you know, ask your tutors, how do you write a application letter? A really good website is ArtQuest. They often hold symposiums or talks or workshops, and also Arts Council have a page on their website showing you successful art applications from before. So it really helps you, you know, formulate your own funding.
When I started at art school, I sort of thought the key contacts would be gallerists, etc., but you soon learn that your most important contacts are your peers. So my advice would be make meaningful relationships with your fellow students, and if you've got people that you have something in common with, like theoretical interests or just anything that you click with, hold on to those contacts. They're your most valuable contacts, your peers. They're the ones that will support you and you support them, and go to each other's shows, go to other private views as well. It's good to get free beer, and but just sort of hold on to your peers, I think, and stick together. I don't think there's ever been a time where that's more important, especially with COVID. That this whole DIY thing is just so important, and sort of making stuff happen for yourself rather than waiting for someone else to present you with an opportunity. We've got to like go and find opportunities for ourselves and work together.
Yeah, I'd say that. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, you go, it's fine.
No, I just wanted to, second that DIY culture is a huge thing. That's why it's sort of set up curation, because I was just bored of, you know, waiting around for something to happen when nothing was going to happen. So I'm helping myself by being active, but also hopefully helping other artists as well at the same time. But sorry, go on.
Thanks. Mine's on a bit of a different note. I think when I started my BA, I kind of thought that all of my work had to be really serious and it had to really say something to everyone all the time. And I kind of just wanted to say that, like, your work doesn't have to be serious all the time. Like, I found that a really valuable thing for myself. I was always trying to be so straight and really trying to be political all the time, and it really was getting me down. And I think kind of like allowing yourself to like laugh at something you make now and again is kind of good, because it shows like the human in it. It shows like the honesty in your making, and I think it makes you more comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that as well, because yeah, I sort of found myself being way too serious on my BA, and that led me down a track of, like, in my second year I already almost sort of knew where I was going to be in my third year, and it just killed all that creativity. So yeah, that's why, you know, using all the workshops is important, experimenting as much as you can, because then that does allow for freedom, and not, you know, you got a whole career of being an artist to look forward to. Don't just pigeonhole yourself within the first 2-3 years of it or something.
And open yourselves up to as many different tutors as possible. Don't just focus on your favorite tutor. Just get a tutorial with your least favorite tutor and get as many different objective inputs as possible. I found that really beneficial when I studied, to get like a real bank of feedback. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Can we just talk a little bit? I'm conscious that I've asked a lot of questions, so I'll just do a few more. How well your experience at art school set you up for life outside of an institution?
Not at all, I would say. Like, talking from my personal experience, I feel like, I mean, we talked a lot about how the work only starts after like graduation from art school and all that, but there's this whole other part that is like making, you know, like creating that environment that you had, that you kind of took for granted as long as you were in art school. But then there's like finding a studio, finding time to go to the studio, how do you talk to galleries, like all these practicalities. I feel, I mean, somebody said before that you should ask that your tutor, and you surely should, but I feel like that is something I'd wish that had happened to me in art school, that somebody talked to, like everybody knew it was going to be hard after art school, but you only realize really when you are out of that golden bubble just how hard it is. And also like, yeah, I mean, there's so many layers to what it means to be an artist. Like also I found it quite hard, like how much time you spend alone in the studio. I mean, that's something no one ever talks about. Like that's also why it's so important to keep that network of friends close around you and like support each other's shows and stuff like that. But just saying that art school did not set me up for this at all, and I had to find it out myself. I mean, there is no one way of like how to do it, but just saying that maybe that's something I'd wish that people would think about sooner. I mean, I know there's so many things to think about in art school, and especially in your last year, it's all you think about the degree show, and but what happens after that? So I think there should be just more talks about also like, I mean, maybe what city to move to. Maybe London is not the place anymore because it's just so freaking expensive, or maybe, I don't know, there's just so many possibilities of making it work. I think that's something that should be talked about a lot more in art school, really.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think it's also key to remember how fast things are changing and how the world is changing. I mean, I remember a panel discussion of tutors that were external, and they'd gone to art school in the 70s, and they were sort of sat back saying, oh, I'd never dream of trying to sell my work. I'd just wait for the collectors to queue up. And I just thought, God, you tossers, like, like, I mean, that's the thing, and the world is changing. And I think now it's more about a DIY culture, teaching students how to form networks with their peers and learn that, really. But I think, yeah, art school sort of set me up in that sort of sense. And I still stay in touch with a lot of my peers and my tutors. So that's really what it is. It's about forming a network. But I think it's hard for an institution to set art students up, because the world is obviously constantly evolving, and so it's hard to predict the future. But at the time, I feel like it set me up pretty well in terms of learning how to contextualize my work and learning how to be self-reflective and form networks. That was useful.
I kind of feel like I've been really lucky, because I kind of feel like I was set up pretty well. I think having younger contemporary artists come in, like Susie and the others, was really helpful for us, because it's people who've they've just had that experience, although they're on the other side now and they've done their MAs and they're teaching and everything now. It's still kind of fresh in their mind, whereas like other tutors, they might have done it like 30 years ago, and it's like you said, it's evolved so much since then. It's nowhere near the same. So I think we were really lucky. And I think also, in a weird way, coronavirus actually kind of benefited us, because although we had to finish our last 2 modules at home, we kind of had that little space in between where we still had the attachments to the institution, but also we were on our own. So it was like a weaning off period. We were able to kind of understand, okay, this is where we're going to be. We're going to be facilitating ourselves. And it allowed us to have that little bit of time. Yeah.
Darryl, I thought you were going to say something because you moved close to the microphone. Silence.
I was saying something. I was saying something. You did.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just saying, well, firstly, I would second everything Carolyn said. Absolutely, I left university and just feeling like I'd just been dropped in the middle of nowhere and not really having a clue of how to navigate a way forward. My way around that was to, get my peers together again. I had a degree show with, and we created a show. I called it Back from the Boondocks, which was specifically talking about where we'd all been, just wandering around. But in terms of transferable skills, the job I do now, I wouldn't have the job if I didn't use the workshop so much when I was a student. Gerian wouldn't have given me a job if he hadn't seen that my work was somehow useful for him in terms of me helping him make his work. So yeah, I definitely learned concrete skills that have moved me forward. But in terms of being an artist and navigating the art world, yeah, I felt a little bit lost at all that. But yeah, I think just a conversation on that before they kick you out would be useful. And about I had to sign on and stuff. Like I didn't really know what was going on, and my goal was just to try and make work. So I was just making work in my little bedroom. And if I had any advice to anyone, like that would be the advice: just try to keep making work. Like no matter how that work takes place, just try to stay creative. And then get yourself out there into the real world, make links, make friends, do all the things you should do, be nice socially, etc. But to answer your questions, for sure, I got skills that are transferable.
Yeah, any other transferable skills we can talk about?
Like speaking, I get like having the confidence of publicly speaking and confidence within your own opinion, and being welcome to other opinions as well. I think those were the best transferable skills that I've been able to put into interviews, into doing writing, into just any job that I've had over the years. Because like in sort of art tutorials, discussions, I'm almost like a completely, or I was at least a completely different person to how I would in interactions outside of an art context. So I used to be quite like a shy person, whereas that scenario, that environment just built up that confidence, and then that has slowly infiltrated into all other aspects of life now.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one thing from going from, well, I went to an all boys state comprehensive and it was all very sort of uptight, and it sort of had a big impact on your self-confidence. And then going suddenly to art school and being surrounded by people that have the same interests and sort of want to talk and discuss things and socialize and actually express yourselves and question things, and that sort of idea of like teamwork and diplomacy and problem solving and just, yeah, being adaptable to a situation. I think especially we're learning that more than ever this year, how adaptable people can be. Yeah.
Okay, so that brings me on to my final question for the evening. We've been talking for quite a while, which I'm sure some of you might not want to answer, having not wanted to answer about your biggest successes at art school, but let's hopefully blow your own trumpet a bit. What are your biggest successes since finishing art school?
Kind of well, just carrying on.
Yeah.
Like Daryl was saying, I was quite fortunate enough to like go straight onto my MA, so I could kind of push that issue to the side and then, you know, have a couple of years to think about how to go about doing it. But I think that's I saw a lot of UEL peers just not carry on. Ones that were really close, and I think, yeah, that is, especially at BA level, that is the hardest thing. That is the biggest success. If you can carry on, no matter, you know, whether it's just for like mental health, whether that's for commercial reasons, I think that's the biggest success that you can wish for.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. And I'd say that it's really interesting now to see like my practice and how it has its own individual characteristics, which I kind of never had whilst I was there. And now I've kind of finished, I can see it all coming together, which is like really nice. And I also think that I now kind of have my own step-by-step processes of working through things, like from a tiny little idea to like a fully realized work. You kind of like create your own way of doing that.
Any last thoughts?
I've got invited on this panel discussion. I like my career.
What's that? This is your biggest success. Thanks, Carol. Glad that we could facilitate that.
Yeah, and I don't want to reiterate what we all just keep saying, but I do think just carrying on is the main success, really. Yeah, echo what Steve said. I've seen so many people just kind of give up, or life takes over, or the job takes over. So yeah, like I'm sure we've all shown in different places and been in cool shows, but I think the fact that we kind of get up and make some work every day is the real success of it all. But it's not easy to do. It's not, at times when you ain't got much money or whatever, and there's a deadline, and you're working like super long days, and like Carolyn said, and you're on your own, like you really got to dig in at times. So yeah, managing to do that, I think, is a success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And still being able to feed myself.
Yeah.
I think you can also change your perspective on what like work is, or how you define work. You don't need a studio. You can make a drawing a day, or take a photograph on your phone. It doesn't need to be, high art. Or I think even if you're just thinking about things, those are all successes. I think it's just good to keep like whether that's just going to shows as well, just keeping active within that frame of mind, rather than closing it off completely.
I think it's so true what Steve just said. It's obviously it's all true what you all said, and we said it many times now, carrying on. But I feel like quite often I felt maybe just leaving out of school, I felt like, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that, that's why I cannot make my practice, or I cannot make the work I used to make. But that's wrong. I make the best work when I have absolutely nothing. And as long as you have two hands and an open mind, maybe you don't even need two hands, you can make work. Like, honestly, if you always, as long as you got yourself, you got this. Like, you can make work. And I think yeah, that's maybe important to remember for, like, also even now, like, I feel like you should just like carry on, but also like be open, like never assume the work to be done. Like, the work is continuous, like one thing leads to another. It's never like it's never going to feel like you ever arrived somewhere. And I feel like you can only feel satisfied for like a tiny moment, you know, and then you know, gotta get to the next thing, and like, you just gotta keep moving, just keep moving.
I think one bit of advice I'd give to current students is try not to compare yourself to others too much. I think that's probably more difficult than it's ever been with the world of Instagram. But there's been so many times where I've been out and about and people have said, oh, you look really busy at the moment. I'm like, really? Do I? And you look really busy. And it's sort of, it goes like that so many times because of Instagram, because we show like our best lives through that. But yeah, so I think the success comes from within, and just being able to be content with what you're doing and plodding along, and carrying on, as we've all said, carrying on, surviving and making work.
We need it on a t-shirt. Always like, keep calm and carry on. It would be so lame. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Sam, over to you.
Yeah, no, so thank you ever so much, each and every one of you, for this invaluable information. It's been great having you guys present to give expert thoughts on how to progress. On behalf of University East London and Conscious Isolation, we do this at the end of every talk. We'll give you a round of applause. Thank you ever so much. Do I clap as well?
Everyone clap.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's still live. I don't know what's going on now.
Sorry.
We're not having the same controls as usual. Thanks so much, guys. That's super interesting.
Thank you, that was great.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys.
Meet you, Matt, Ella, Caroline, Steve.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.